Hi, this is Nicole Scheidel, and today we're here for our weekly look at life issues in healthcare. Today, Amanda's with me. We're finally in the same city. We just finished our inaugural bioethics symposium, and Amanda, I'm just going to turn it over to you to talk about what looked like and kind of what we learned from it.
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. It's such a joy to be back here in Ottawa, where we convened an amazing cohort of participants for our inaugural Canadian Physicians for Life Bioethics Symposium. This was a dream of ours for quite some time, and it was such an amazing thing to bring together medical students, residents, and also some law students to the nation's capital to have a conference on conscience in the culture and in the professions. That was the theme. And so what we did is we had 7 Socratic discussion sessions with assigned texts in advance, which everyone took very seriously. We had texts ranging from literature to memoir, philosophy, history, really interdisciplinary range of texts and a whole range of different genres in order to explore conscience. And so there were about 3 or 4 texts per session. Everyone did the reading in advance, and then we had sort of thematic sessions on things like conscience and moral intuition. And it was really amazing to have everyone around the table together, bringing their education and experience to bear on the conversation. We had just such a range of anecdotes from these physician and residents' professional experience, from their experience in medical school, from their own kind of insights that emerged in light of discussing these texts, which are really more kind of in the humanities. And so to see this integration was just splendid, and the insights are, we'll get into them soon.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for me, that was the thing that I found most compelling about the whole symposium was the cross-fertilization of ideas between lawyers and law students and medical students and physicians. And one of the things one of the law students said to me was, I just didn't understand medicine until this point. And it was such a great opportunity for them to understand each other's professions and to dialogue about some of the issues that kind of haunted each profession around the exercise of one's conscience.
That's so right. And one of the unintended consequences that we also realized through having the interdisciplinary approach and the mix of law and medicine around the table was that we saw that these professionals really avoided the jargon and the acronyms that might be proper to their own fields. There's such a tendency when you're among the same kind to kind of be siloed and to use the sort of jargon and acronyms that are typical to your profession. But here there was the utmost respect for the other's professional excellence, and realizing and not taking for granted that they might not know the same kind of terms or use the same currency of kind of language within their own field. And just that was respected, and that it inspired everyone to use the full terms for things, to explain themselves in a way that just really, I thought, made the conversation so much richer.
For sure. So from the whole symposium, what are some of the highlights for you?
Well, there's so many insights through the course of several 75-minute discussions. One thing that really stands out above all, though, is we had a few sessions looking at the history of euthanasia and how in the past, and though this is still a factor today, more so in the past, maybe someone would be regarded as not really fit to keep on living if they weren't being productive. And this sort of dehumanizing idea that a person is only worth kind of keeping within a society owing to their productivity. And we do see some of that. There is a sense, either in a person, him or herself, or in society at large, that our value comes from what we can do and not always simply from who we are. But what came up in the course of the discussion, someone had a really interesting insight. And he said, now it's not so much just quality of life, but it's also quality of social connection. That once a person no longer has family members or friends around, maybe once someone doesn't have visitors at a hospital, then there's this sense, maybe for that person, him or herself, and for the community at large, that life is not as valuable. And this is a new kind of dehumanization where the person is threatened by the lack of social connection. Of course, social connection is a good thing, and family and friends are good, but your worth is not reducible to the number of friendships or the number of visitors that you have. And so this really, I think, struck me. I have a lot of older friends, much, much older, who, when they say things like, all my friends are dead, it really, really gets to me. And I think, what is it like when your spouse has died, or when you say, all my friends are dead? Do you have a sense that your own life and your own worth is kind of dwindling or fading? And no, like this dignity is irreducible. The value of life, to be lived to the very end, doesn't depend on um, the number of contacts you have, or the number of visits, but how do we build up that interior fortitude so that you have a sense of your life and you know what you're about, even when you have that poverty of connection, even when, by no fault of your own, many of your friends are no longer in your life because they've passed away. So this is something that's starting to provoke a lot of reflection. We live in a time of where the sort of those who are rich in our society are those who are influencers, those not necessarily even with the greatest wealth, but with the greatest following. And this is a really interesting phenomenon of our times, where we really assess wealth and kind of status in terms of social connection. So how do we both address the poverty of true, authentic social connection and encounter that we have, and at the same time as doing that, not make a person's worth and value of being in the world reducible to how many followers they have or how many hospital visitors they have?
For sure. I think it also goes to the point of thinking about how we can improve intergenerational relationships. So maybe the friends of your peers are no longer there, but how do you reach out to younger generations and forge relationships and pass on that wisdom that you have from the experience of living? So I think that's a whole other topic of things that we could talk about and think about how we enrich our lives by our connections with those who are much older than us.
That's so true. And that's where there's a kind of generosity, and that intergenerational solidarity is so, so fruitful. And I think it's just such a beautiful point. I hope we keep coming back to it and exploring it ever more deeply, because it is something that our culture is starved for. We discussed how also, in addition to fewer people having maybe a grandparent in the home, or an aging parent to take care of in the same city, or to whom they can go and travel, there are other kinds of deprival of experience. For example, many people do not hear of a death in their family until they're much, much older. This is, like, for many people, a good thing, because we don't want, obviously, our family members to die young, to die prematurely. And at the same time, there's this kind of deprivation of an experience of death. And so stronger intergenerational friendships and relationships make us privy to the full spectrum of life and to the realities just in nature, and in what it means to be human. So yeah, just realizing that some people, when they find out that a loved one has died, it's such a shock, not only because that loved one has died, but because that is death. And it's something that had never before been experienced before. And I think that almost multiplies the sort of trauma of the loss, is that it's the particular family member, but especially if that's your only, or that's your first, or that's your minimal experience. And so there's something where, if we have stronger communities and relationships, and we have sort of conversations about death and dying and suffering, not that we won't be faced when it happens to us more directly. On the contrary, we'll have a greater ethical and empathetic sensitivity when it does.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of your blog from last year, dyingtomeetyou.ca. A little shout out for that. But that was an excellent blog that you did for a year, contemplating and trying to talk about death and make it more, how could I say, just more part of the normal experience that people have. Because typically, you're right, we're so sanitized from it and we don't have that experience. And so we maybe make it so much the other. It's so fearful that, and we just want to keep it out of our existence as something that happens.
That's right. I was really motivated to start that because I thought, as a sort of cathartic project, in order to renew the cultural conversations around death, that it was time to write about it in an edifying way. That doesn't mean that death is something to gloss over or to like, no, death is serious and it's sad. And at the same time, what I found by doing a daily blog every single day throughout all of 2021 about death and dying in this kind of edifying, uplifting way was it just led to a lot of conversations that I would not have had otherwise. Sometimes they really needed a topic for a post, and whoever I happened to be with that day, I would almost say something to the effect of, tell me about a death in your family. And of course, that's not the first thing in the conversation, but these are friends who I know well. And honestly, each time it created such an openness, and people did want to share, and everyone did have a story. And the question that seemed a bit awkward or startling at first just like melted our hearts. And then I would go and I'd write the blog post based off of a story that someone shared, and I'd send the person the link 15 or 20 minutes later. And that person would say to me, I had no idea that I had a story. I had this experience, I had this suffering, I had this wound, but like you turned it into a story. And the only way that I turned it into a story was by receiving it, just
Yes.
by listening, and then by being able to tell it to someone else in the form of the post. But really, that's how we make stories, and this is how we make meaning. So we also had some sessions throughout the bioethics symposium on something called dignity therapy, which involves
Yes.
kind of making a story about the end of life. At the end of life, with palliative care patients, giving them the space and the opportunity and the tools to kind of create a record of their life to share with their loved ones, and also for their own sake. We discussed to what extent is this dignity therapy approach of chronicling your life. Maybe it's for loved ones, but maybe the loved ones never read it. We kind of talked about how many people have wedding videos. Not everyone even goes and watches their own wedding video once they have it produced. So this thing of, okay, that you have a record at the end of life, but maybe that's also for the person's own sake. There's something to kind of interiority and going into yourself and reviewing your life with gratitude, thoughtfully, kind of contemplatively. And then we also discussed, like, of course, it is an immense value to the family members who are open and who do receive those stories, because that's what gives them a sense of identity and rootedness. And where does our identity come from? Where does our sense of continuity and groundedness in the world come from? It comes from the stories that are handed on from generation to generation. So just fascinating discussions. And even just to jump off of that as well, not only how that serves at the end of life, but what are the possibilities for this kind of dignity therapy earlier in life? Are there ways that we can already be asking one another the questions that we would ask toward the end of life? And would that be fruitful for the way that we live out our lives much earlier before our deaths?
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I think the bioethics symposium definitely was a huge success. People got a lot out of it. I know we're still reflecting on the fruits and what came of it, and where we go from here. I think certainly it's something that we're going to do again and again. We're really excited about the impact it had on people. I know you were looking over the responses from people from the bioethics symposium. Is there anything that jumped out at you from those responses?
I was really touched to see how much people felt that this was an experience of excellence where they were treated well. It was a sort of dignified, elevated experience, just insofar as we came around and we discussed things philosophically. Many of the medical students say this is filling certain gaps that exist in Canadian medical education, and that is immensely valuable. These are the kinds of conversations that take reflective distance from the busyness of the workday. There are not always times for people to step back and reflect, but especially for professionals to step back and in a community in sincerity discuss some of these things. That is such a unique thing. And many of them attested that it's not only going to be making them better doctors, it's making them better human beings overall.
Yeah, no, I think that to me makes it all so worthwhile is the personal growth and professional growth that comes out of these kinds of interactions. One of the presentations that really struck me was the one that Dr. Christian Collier did on her philosophy of medicine and what is your philosophy of medicine, and how you think about integrating your moral framework within your philosophy of medicine. And I thought that was super compelling and very thought-provoking for everyone in the room. And you're right, like having these kinds of conversations and thinking about these kinds of well, just your philosophy and the way you're going to live your life, and what's important and how you kind of aim all of that is so important to living a fruitful, not only personal life, but a fruitful professional life.
Absolutely. And so it was great to have this mix of Socratic seminars, also presentations with long Q&A, so that our participants who have wonderful questions and experiences could engage the speakers who we brought in and have some comparative discussion too, given the international angle among some of the presenters. And then we also had lots of social time, so that over meals and the intentionally half-hour snack breaks, which fly by because everyone basically continues the discussions around the seminar table, but in pairs or in smaller groups. This was amazing to see the sustained conversation and just those different nuances to the conversation by creating a setting aside from the professional sphere, and yet with professionals who could then kind of have that reflective distance among a community of peers. Absolutely, it was a great highlight, and it's such a joy to put together with you.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic, and I can't wait till we do it again. And for those of you listening to this broadcast, we will be doing it again, and pay attention to our website. We'll let you know, or get on our mailing list, and we'll let you know when the next one is, so that people can apply, because it is for a small group. That's what makes it special, is it's a small enough group that everyone can participate. And so as a consequence, you have to get your name there quickly, right at the beginning.
Yep.
Okay, very good, Amanda. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was great to see you. Great to have you back in Ottawa for this brief period of time, and really, really excited and grateful that we were able to have this fantastic bioethics symposium.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Nicole. Bye.
Bye.